This is Jets FM on the OFN as we update the latest with the New York Jets here on the Lads Football Radio Network. Jan Levine is not going to be here. Actually, we recorded a show earlier this week. We had some technical difficulties on the show, and the scheduling has just been tough. Jan's work schedule, his regular work schedule, including his RotoWire responsibilities, and my schedule, we just didn't mesh. So figured, you know what? Let's just get something on the air this week. Of course, Greg Williams was fired. Jets are still winless and so forth. So let's get right to it. So look, the big news is Greg Williams, no question. And my take is strictly about how peculiar it is that Adam Gase, who many Jet fans want fired, who many in the media believe will get fired 100% when the season's over. I just find it peculiar that with just a few games remaining that he fires his defensive coordinator. It's not something you see very often. It's just not. Now, you could see it after the second game of a season, and then later on in the season, the coach gets fired. Hey, he tried everything in his power to take full control over the team. Just didn't work. Fired his head coach early enough in the season. That didn't work. Hey, you know what? You had your shot. You're gone. It's just unusual. Sorry, it is. It's just very rare that you see a coach who many believe will be fired in a few games, fires one of his top assistants. Basically, Greg Williams is the second in charge on the team, and he fired him. There's 4 games left. So I find it peculiar. I try to be as real as I can on this show and on all the shows I do. I think that's one of the things I pride myself on more than anything is the ability to stay away from biases, which it's tough. And I learned that a long time ago, because I've been doing this for a long time. And at some point, I don't know, I would say after about the first quarter of my career, that's when I realized that that's not the way I wanted to go. And there are a lot of people who broadcast, write, and so forth, especially broadcasters that, and since I do a lot of handicapping as well, it's very important. So you get a lot of broadcasters and/or handicappers that will, whether they proclaim that they're unbiased, and you just know they're not. You know they're biased, and you can be biased. I got no problem with that, but don't be a phony. And that's what I see a lot. I see a lot of phoniness. I see a lot of people who are biased about their team, pro or con. It's not just pro biases, because how often have we talked about the con? About everything that the Jets do is garbage, and my belief in whether or not or what kind of a fan that truly is. I just do it my way, and I've done a very good job, especially fine tuning the biases over the year. I hope that's a word, by the way. And getting to a point where I can do it naturally. And that's why when I talk like I have on this network, and I know there are a lot of listeners that we've had for many years, so they probably hear me saying the same thing every year. Oh man, he said that last year. Oh, he says that every year. That's because there's new listeners all the time. And one of the things that I want to make sure that people remember, or if they are new to the show and the coverage here for the Jets, from my point of view, is just look back at what happened with Ryan Fitzpatrick. All we had to do is beat the Buffalo Bills in Week 17 season to get to the postseason. The last time the Jets sniffed the postseason, and I just couldn't stand that team. Couldn't stand it. The way it's not as bad, but it's almost like the way that a lot of the media and the fans are representing the Jets this year in a negative way. That's kind of how I was that year. And you probably think, well, how could you do that? They almost went to the playoffs. Look how this team hasn't been in the playoffs very often in the last 11 years. But that's because, again, I was being a realist. I didn't want Ryan Fitzpatrick re-signed in the first place. I felt everything that was going on that year was a complete waste of everybody's time. And that's what happened. It was a waste of everybody's time because they decided, as what is normally the case, where we can see a change should be made earlier than it ever is. Just never is. And that was a circumstance where change needed to be made. They needed a youth movement. Didn't happen. We knew it, or I knew it. I know there were people on my side, fans on my side, no question. But the majority, hey, we love Ryan Fitzpatrick, man. What a great, cool dude with the beard and everything. It just didn't really, those couple of years, the year that we almost met to the postseason, and then the year after when he resigned, and I didn't want him resigned, I just couldn't take those 2 years because even though we all know Geno Smith is not an NFL starting quarterback, we didn't know at the time. And I felt that, look, what are we doing wasting our time with Ryan Fitzpatrick if this guy is never going to be anything more than a 500 quarterback? Now, he might be a lot more successful if you had a really great team around him, but we didn't. That's why when we talk about things like Adam Gase and things that are going on with this year's team, I try to be a realist with that as well. Everything that's gone on. That's all I've ever said. Now, sure, if you say to me, do you want Adam Gase back? I'm going to say to you what I have said over the last month or two. Well, if I'm running the Jets and I have an idea of who I want replacing Adam Gase, and hey, wait a second, maybe it's Bill Cowher. That's another thing that happened this week. The Bill Cowher news, is that real? I don't believe the Jim Harbaugh news. I told Ryan Dunleavy that last month. I've been saying that here on this network for the last couple of years, being a Michigan fan. I know what it is to be a Michigan fan. I know where the loyalties lie within Michigan with Jim Harbaugh, and I just still do not believe he is going to leave. That doesn't mean he won't, but I haven't believed it the last couple of years, and I've been right. And yes, this year is definitely more like, even I'm a little bit, well, you know what? Maybe there is a possible change coming. But just like with the Jets, if I'm a Michigan guy, I want to make sure, who are they hiring? Because I remember how bad it was before Harbaugh got there. Harbaugh has actually improved Michigan since he's been there, believe it or not. With the Jets, okay, you're going to tell me that Bill Cowher could possibly be interested in this job? And maybe what happened was Bill Cowher, he's never going to ruffle feathers. He doesn't want anybody fired because of him, and he doesn't want to be in that kind of situation. Well, maybe he had a talk with Boomer, and this was what they came up with. Hey, Boomer, why don't you go ahead and spread the rumors and, sort of like put the thought in the head of Christopher Johnson and Woody. And then maybe if they do wind up picking up the phone and calling me, and I'll keep it quiet, and they'll say, hey, if we're looking for a head coach in the offseason, would you be interested in sitting down with us? And even if he said, sure, I'm not going to tell you that I would take the job, but I would be interested in sitting down and hearing what you would say, then you know what that means. Absolutely, you go after Bill Cowher. Absolutely. Okay, so that's the way I stand. And Jim Harbaugh, if he were to leave Michigan, I don't think New York's the place for him. I just don't. I do not believe the way he handles the media is not very good. And I think the media would hate him. And if the media hates you, you're in big trouble. You're going to have to really win fast. And things haven't gone well for Jim lately in Michigan. I don't like the way he's handled hiring or holding on to Don Brown. Remember I said he always kind of figure out, or at least, I've learned over the years that for the most part, whenever I think a GM should fire a coach or should move on from a player, that kind of thing, it always seems, or somebody should move on from a GM, no one should move on from a GM, it always seems to happen a year later. Not always, but it just seems that way in a lot of circumstances. And that's what's happened. And so that's what was going on with Jim Harbaugh and Don Brown, the defensive coordinator at Michigan. I thought he should have been fired after they got destroyed by Ohio State last year. He can't. His defense does not work well with Ohio State. If it doesn't work well against the Buckeyes and you're going to get killed every year, what are you holding on to him for? You got to beat Ohio State to do anything. He held on to him a year too late because there is no way Don Brown, if Jim Harbaugh comes back, will be the defensive coordinator next year. So I didn't like the way he handled that. I don't like the way he's handled the quarterback situations. He keeps bringing junior college transfers or graduate transfers and sticking with the older guys when the college football landscape is littered with freshmen playing right away, redshirt freshmen playing right away. He doesn't want to go down that path. I'm telling you, I don't like what I see from Jim in a couple of those scenarios. That his stubbornness that could be tricky. So, but again, I don't think Jim Harbaugh's coming to Michigan, coming into the Jets. If he does, it would I say, hey, I would rather take Gase or Harbaugh. Okay. There aren't a lot of other coaches besides that I've heard of that I see. Oh, definitely Campbell in college. Definitely Lincoln Riley in college. Yes, those guys. Yes, fire Gase, hire those guys. So there are a handful of coaches out there that I'm okay with. I am not okay with firing Adam Gase and we'll see what we got. No, I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm not okay with it. Because I am not okay with bringing in a coach that's never coached before, number one, as a head coach. Not saying you can't do it, but man, you better be spot on with it. You better know what you're doing. This better be it. Because if you hire another guy who's never been a head coach before and he flops, I mean, do we really need to go down that road again? And then do we need to hire a defensive coordinator, a guy who's been a defensive coach again? Finally, we hired an offensive coach and we gave him a year and a couple of games before everybody wants to run him out of town. So I look at it and I see Saleh from San Francisco. Okay, I like that guy. He's actually at the top of my list, but he's never been a head coach before. For guys that aren't the main guys that we've talked about. Forget about Don Martindale. I want nothing to do with Don Martindale. Okay, because if I want a guy who's never been a head coach before and that's on the defensive side, I want Saleh. I'm not going to go to plan B. And maybe do we really have to go down the Baltimore Raven coaching tree again? So as far as some of the other, who else? Let's see. I'm trying to see who else was in here because there was an article. Let me see here. There was an article that I think it was Cannizzaro in the Post. Yeah. For the love of God, fire Adam Gase already. Hey, boost up the morale of the Jet fans because that's what they all want anyway. He talks about firing Bill O'Brien, Dan Quinn, and Matt Patricia, and that at this point they're ahead of the Jets in the process of hiring a new head coach. Okay? Those guys had more tenure than Gase. All right? And I'm going to bring this up again, and I've talked about it before. The reason Adam Gase also has not been fired yet is not just because, well, why fire him now? What's it going to prove? That definitely, I think, has something to do with it. And they do want to see whether or not Darnold can actually wake up with Adam Gase. But that's because I don't think that they're totally sold on Adam Gase getting fired yet. I think if they were, then I think that the chances are a lot more likelier that Adam Gase would be gone and a lot less likely that you would allow Gase to fire Greg Williams. I still think it's a long shot that Gase comes back, but these are the things that I'm trying to bring out to you that nobody else in the media wants to do it because he's definitely being fired. And I'm just trying to give you a little bit of perspective that I from what I see, from what I know, from all my experience, that it's not 100%. That does not mean he won't be fired. I still think he's going to get fired. But I'm just trying to tell you it's not 100%. The other guys that they brought up that Cannizzaro brought up in the article, and I already named a couple of them, but he brings up Brian Daboll and Greg Roman. Now, this is the problem, okay? And I've talked about it on my other shows. You have got to be kidding me with those two guys. Because I have been a big critic of both of them. Did you watch? Go ahead and watch the wild card game last year, the Buffalo Bills in Houston, and tell me you want Brian Daboll as your head coach. Head coach, okay? And have you been paying attention to the Baltimore Ravens offense this year? Greg Roman is a one-trick pony. That's it. He's a guy that has had success with guys like Colin Kaepernick for a couple of years, and that didn't work out in the long run. And he's had success for 1 year with Lamar Jackson. And how's that looking so far this year in year 2? So don't, and we're talking about that elevating him to head coach. So if you're going to bring up guys like Daboll and Roman, then yeah, 100% I want Adam Gase back with Trevor Lawrence and a better football team and see what he can do before I hand the reins over to Brian Daboll or Greg Roman. Okay? And that's the whole idea about not just what I think, but I also think what they think. And you have got to keep into consideration. Remember, when Gase was first hired, everybody in the media, most of the media led you to believe that Adam Gase was in complete control of the franchise. Remember that? It's so interesting how Gase goes from being, the puppet master for the New York Jets. Oh, that's my guy, Joe Douglas. I want him. He comes in. So Gase is the puppet master, right? So we're led to believe that that's the case. And I'm not saying that he didn't have a lot of control, because I believe he did. I believe that Adam Gase, who didn't have the control in Miami, was promised a lot more control here. That was one of the reasons that he liked the opportunity. And of course, he thought that I've got a nice young quarterback as well. Okay, this is a good rebuilding process. I've got my franchise quarterback that hopefully will be my franchise quarterback. It's going to take a few years, but within 2 or 3 years, hopefully we'll be on the upswing. Well, that hasn't happened, but that was the idea. And you just can't tell me that that's the way they were all thinking. Oh, let's bring in Joe Douglas. He's my guy. And Douglas is Adam Gase's guy. And then after the way things ended last year, okay, they end on a 6-2 last 8. Darnold played some of his best ball. And I'm sorry, but under the offices there, they're thinking completely different than you guys. They're thinking we're headed in the right direction. Then the COVID stuff happens and everybody's hand tied. And you can't coach these guys the way you want to. And it's a young team and you got to trade Adams. Mosley opts out. Things just didn't work out. And I've said this on other shows about NFL and college. And I just think, in my opinion, that it's really difficult to fire, or if you got an idea about a guy, a coach, a GM, and you're not sure, that I think a lot of guys are going to get the benefit of the doubt one more year because of this season. Now, being a winless team might be completely different. That might be so bad that, sorry, you're going to be the percentage that is gone. Can't handle it. I'm just trying to let you know that there still might be a different kind of thinking process going on. How do you know Joe Douglas cares about what's going on in the press or what the fans are saying about Adam Gase? How do you know that Christopher Johnson, sure, they're going to hear it, but do you actually think that they're turning on the radio and reading all this negative stuff all the time about their football team right now? Who would want to do that? So they're not, and look, and I wouldn't really respect them if they decided to hire or fire guys based on what the fans had to say. So as far as I'm concerned, hey, you know what? If they decide to fire Gase and they bring on a good head coach, great, like we just talked about. But if they don't fire him, then I'm actually going to have a pretty decent. My respect factor, let's just put it that way, is going to go up. It's going to go up. Let me just put a little note here, because I have a show coming up. But matter of fact, Evan Lazar, we had the Patriots. We'll talk about that in just a second. And we're going to do a Patriots show a little bit later on after the game last night. It has nothing to do with the Jets, except for one thing, and that is, will the Patriots be looking to win the final game of the season? And the fact that they lost is not a good thing for Jet fans. So keep that in mind. Not a good thing. And I still believe, and I've said this before, I still believe that Jacksonville is going to win another game. I think they're going to beat Jackson. I think they're going to beat Chicago. And I wouldn't be surprised if they shocked at least one other team other than Chicago before or after. Not saying they're going to have 3 wins. I'm just saying at some point they're going to get a second win. They were my upset pick to win last week, and it took Minnesota overtime. So I think they're going to get another win, and I still think there's a possibility for the Jets to get a win. And you know what? It could be New England, because if New England does not need to win in that final game, there is no doubt in my mind that Bill Belichick is going to play his backups. He's going to play his young quarterback, and he's going to coach him to win. But if they don't, hey. And I put myself in a position at this point. Another thing that's important to let you guys know where I stand with Trevor Lawrence thing, because I have been all in on Trevor Lawrence. It's taken me a while because I still wanted my team to win, and I haven't bailed on this team the way a lot of other Jet fans have early, and have been on the Trevor Lawrence deal. Even though I think it's interesting, and I'm gonna bring up a whole bunch of stuff, clips and things of that nature once we get to the off season, and I'm going to rehash what a lot of these media, Jet fans especially, the Rich Eisens of the world, talking about how, hey, what do you think the Jets should do if with Sam Darnold in relation to Trevor Lawrence? If you don't know and didn't know 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, whether or not Trevor Lawrence would be your pick, and you would still be trading Sam Darnold as of 4 or 6 weeks ago, then I'm sorry, your credibility is out the window as far as knowing what's best for the New York Jets. But we'll talk more about that in the offseason. And again, getting back to the respect factor with Christopher Johnson or Woody Johnson. And you know what? Woody, when he comes back or when he's on the phone and he knows he's going to be back in a few weeks, might just say, look, I know you guys like Adam, et cetera, but he's got to go. That could happen. Christopher Johnson and Joe Douglas might actually be like, you know what? We want to try this again. And Woody might override him. Who knows? Could be. Could happen. But again, that's why it's important to keep perspective and understand that no matter what you are hearing, I am sorry, but there is still a chance that Adam Gase could be back. And if the Jets win, his case is going to improve a little bit. I can't see the Jets winning 2 games. I just don't think, based on their schedule. If Cleveland had still been stumbling around, that'd be different. But now, but who knows? It's still 2 weeks away. And Cleveland can go, they could change on a dime. I don't think one game makes Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns a Super Bowl contender. We'll see how they go up against Baltimore on Monday. I expect them to win. They're one of my top picks. And if they follow through and beat Baltimore, Jets are in big time trouble. But if they come back down to earth and lose to Baltimore and get swept by a team that's been struggling for the past 6 weeks, then you know what? Maybe the Jets have a chance against Cleveland too. Jets don't have a chance this week. Not only is Mims out because of personal reasons, but Crowder now looks like he may not make it. And I don't want to hear anything about, oh, poor Sam Darnold, he didn't have his receivers. We've been down that road. Because he has had his receivers the last few weeks, and it hasn't happened. It didn't matter anyway. And he's had his offensive line for the most part, and it hasn't mattered anyway. We talked about the Pro Football Focus stat about 5 weeks ago when I told you, and I'll keep bringing that up when we get into the offseason about Sam Darnold once again, about it didn't matter. When he had perfect protection, nothing to do with bad offensive line or anything like that. He had a terrible game. It's a specific game that I highlighted that stat, but that doesn't just mean it was that one game. Okay, so I don't want to hear he hasn't had an offensive line. He hasn't had weapons. I don't want to hear it. The guy is at this point. Yeah, do I think the Jets are blameless? No, but at this point, you have to be real about where we stand right now. Whether you want to blame the organization or say it's 50-50, the fact is Sam Darnold's brain, his head in this market, gone. And we know, I'm not living in there like a lot of you guys listening to the show, watching the show, still live there in the area, but when one of these athletes, when they've kind of checked out in the New York market, they don't check back in. They're done. And unless Sam Darnold does some sort of freaky turnaround in the next 4 weeks, okay, he's checked out. And by the way, as far as the other thing that also just shows you about what you would think whether you have a good, keen mind on what you think the Jets should be doing or not doing. The people who were, whoa, what are the Jets are trying to the Jets are trying to tank, so that's why they're starting Sam Darnold, or the Jets are tanking in general. It's just so dumb. And then the other thing, hey, shouldn't they play Joe Flacco? If they, again, if they want to win, I mean, they are not benching. Remember the whole thing about trading Sam Darnold too? Some of these things are just ridiculous. And these are the same people who are just set in their minds that even if Adam Gase gets fired, that they're not going to be satisfied until they start seeing positive results on the field from the next head coach. And once again, that's not a true fan. Okay? If you're so much of a fan that you hate the organization because you can't stand what you've seen for the last 20 years or so, and you can't stand Woody Johnson, then you know what? Leave. That's what I did when I was young. I was young, so I had a lot of years ahead of me to invest in leaving, but I was a Yankee fan growing up. I could not stand George Steinbrenner. And it was the period in the New York Yankees when things weren't going well for them. When he was meddling and they were losing, I had enough, and I bolted. And do I still kind of have a little bit in my heart Yankees? Yeah, but they're not even close to being my favorite team. Well, you know what? Same thing. If you don't like the owner because the owner is not selling the team, and you just want to keep bashing them, the only time you're going to say positive things about the Jets is when they win, that is not a true fan. Okay? And I don't want to hear about you. I also decided that Trevor Lawrence would not, of course, he would be awesome to be here. And I want him to be here. And he is one of the can't miss guys. He's a Joe Burrow. Okay. He's an Andrew Luck. He's a Peyton Manning. He's a can't miss. But I am going to look at this in the best way possible. And that is, if the Jets don't get the first pick, they end up with the second pick or the third pick. The fact of the matter is there are still some pretty decent quarterbacks out there. This is a decent quarterback class. It's not as bad as other classes. So it's a decent class. I'm not a Fields guy, but I'm interested in Trask. I'm interested in Wilson. And I even said to Ryan Dunleavy, hey, if you want to bring back Darnold next year, if you can't get Trevor Lawrence, and then you want to add some depth, well, go ahead and draft Sean King. Go ahead and draft De'Ara King in the third, fourth round or something like that. Bring him in with Morgan and with Darnold. And I'd rather have that than, because again, I'm not a Josh Fields guy, but I'd rather have that than them picking a quarterback that they're just not sure of. But I think there are some guys out there that Joe Douglas will like. I think there'll be a quarterback, if he doesn't get the top pick, he'll like. And if you have the second or third pick, you'll be able to get that guy. You'll also be able to trade down possibly and get that guy and add more picks. So I've said this all along. I'm a Joe Douglas guy right now. If Joe Douglas decides with Christopher Johnson to fire Adam Gase, I'm all for it. If he decides to keep him on again, I'm all for it. I believe in Joe Douglas. I know a lot of Jet fans were unsure about Joe Douglas. I know a lot of in the media unsure about Joe Douglas. I know there are a lot of fans that don't really like what Joe Douglas has done so far. But there are not a lot of fans out there, or anyone in the media for that matter, that believe in Joe Douglas the way I do. I am all on board with Joe Douglas. If there's a point in the next, and this is going to be the offseason to prove it, if there's a point coming up that I all of a sudden look at some moves he's making or whatever the case may be, and I start thinking, you know what, I think I'm wrong. I now all of a sudden, maybe this is not the guy. But until that time comes, I am 100% right now, as of today, behind, and have been for the past year, behind Joe Douglas. And once you are behind the GM, and you know you got an owner that wants to win and will spend the money, and you've got that. And Bill Cowher has basically told Trevor Lawrence, and he's told other potential coaching hires that the New York Jets franchise is a really good job. It's the best job out there if you get Trevor Lawrence. But just because you get Trevor Lawrence doesn't make it a great opportunity. If Trevor Lawrence goes to Jacksonville, that doesn't make the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise a great location, because it's not. But It's something that Bill Cowher believes, and it's something that I've believed in, and I've said that before. This is not. That's why the whole talk about Trevor Lawrence is going to change his mind about going to the NFL because the Jets might get his pick is just nonsense. It's BS. This is a really good opportunity for a Trevor Lawrence. It's a really good opportunity if the Jets fire Gase to bring in whether it's a Cowher or one of the top assistant coaches out there. No, I don't want Eric Bieniemy. I'm sorry. But you know what? If I end up with Eric Bieniemy and Josh Fields, I'll have open hearts and I'll try to make it work and I'll think positively and we'll talk about that. But I'm just letting you know. And when I say I don't want these guys, it's not like I'm going to kill myself if I have these guys and it's going to be a complete waste of our lives. It's just that that they're not at the top of my list. That's what I mean by that. That because Josh Fields could be a really good quarterback in the NFL. Eric Bieniemy could be a really good coach in the NFL, head coach in the NFL. They're just not at the top of my list. That's all. Anyway, I'm going to close out by just letting everybody know that two quick things. First of all, the nonsense that's also going on, and I'm pro Giants right now. I really very rarely have been pro Giants, but I'm pro Giants right now, and I've been pro Giants. Ryan Dunleavy covers the Giants. We've talked positively about them on the OFN Today show. They're one of my top picks this week, and I'm pro Giants because it's a great story. Everything that's going on with the Giants, so it's kind of fun thing. But this thing about the Giants, look at how great things are and the optimism compared to the Jets, that's just BS at the highest degree. Because if this Jet team was in the NFC East this season, I'm sorry. But as of a couple of weeks ago, before the Seattle win by the Giants and the Washington win over Pittsburgh, they had done nothing to basically beat themselves in that division, that crappy division. So if the Jets were in the NFC East, you know what? They'd have about 3 wins heading into last week too. And maybe their feelings and attitudes would be a little bit different as well, because your feelings and attitudes do kind of change when you're actually, on a nice little winning streak. These attitudes weren't like this before the Giants had their 4-game winning streak. The attitudes weren't like that with Washington before they got their little winning streak. But you put a winning streak together because you're playing a crappy division. In saying that, I think I've always spoken highly of Ron Rivera with the Washington situation, and same thing with Judge. I thought that was an interesting, gutsy hire, and like I said, I think that's going to work out well, and all power to them. And I think it's great, but do not bash the Jets and compare them to the Giants, because the Jets happen to play in the AFC East and the Giants are playing in the NFC East. I don't want to hear it. And I know there is a difference because of the fact that everybody hates Gase, and there's a love thing going on with Judge now. But remember, before the Giants had this winning streak, there was no love fest with the fan base and the media with Joe Judge, because they were unsure. And there were a lot of them were skeptical. Now there's a little bit of a love thing going on because they've got this winning streak going. And whoa and behold, we're in first place because we're in a crappy division. So I don't want to hear that comparison. Finally, I want to leave off with a positive thing, and that's the fact that prospects, that's what we do best here at ourlads.com and the Ourlads Football Network. We are going to have an awesome offseason, especially with the Jets, with the top draft capital they're going to have, and God forbid they get or they don't get Trevor Lawrence, which depending on which way you're looking at it from a Jet or not Jet perspective. But it's going to be awesome. We're going to have so much to talk about on this show and the other shows, but since this is the Jet show, with all the draft capital they're going to have, the potential of Trevor Lawrence, it's going to be great. We're going to break down a ton of players on this show to get you ready for the guys to keep an eye on, the positions and so forth. So that's just want to let you know, things are going to really spike up here when the season's over, when our season begins as Jet fans. And if we end up with the first pick, it's going to be an awesome offseason here on the Ourlads Football Network. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Jan Levine will hopefully return. We'll wrap up the Seattle game, Jamal Adams, and also take a look at what's in store for the Jets after Seattle, which I think are the Rams. And then again, what is it? Cleveland and New England, and I think that's about it, right? Thank God. So we'll talk next week with Jan Levine, and like I said, I'm going to hook up with Evan Lazar now and talk some New England Patriot football. Recap what happened with the Pats and the Rams last night on Pats Probe. So thanks for checking in with us here on Jets FM. We'll talk to you next week.